Hi guys, welcome back. This is going to be continuation of the Vigilante Diaries, the demo. Um, I'm sorry I wasn't here all of last week. My MS was flaring up pretty badly, so I didn't release a game Wednesday or Sunday. I was just completely out of it. Um, Normally doesn't happen after I have my infusions, but I just haven't been feeling that great lately. Anyways, shall we get into games? Yes, we shall. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Uh, Never demanded, required, necessary, or anything like that. It's really just your prerogative. If you feel like doing that, it would be super helpful, but no pressure. It's a demo, Vigilante Diaries. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and continue. I have a little frog in my voice too, so I apologize about that as well. Alright, so getting right into it, let's look at our stats first. I have 5 towards order. We've got -2 in aggression, leads me more towards pacifist. For my physical, we're a little stronger. We have a +1. For my stability, we're +2 for sane. And those are all the stats I have currently. In my relationships, Dad is a 0, Mom is a 2, Paul is a 1, and Chrissy is new, Christine Mihan. So I'll read hers because she's new. For me, Christine Mihan was always there, a playmate who lived 2 streets over, the daughter of one of my mother's best friends and Officer Gordon Mihan. Alright, I'm going to take a drink of water before we get into this. Staying hydrated. Alright, June 6, 1958, Chrissy. I have memories of many firsts, but not the first time I saw Chrissy. For me, Christine Mihan was always there, like my parents or Paul. A childhood friend who lived 2 streets over, the daughter of one of my mother's best friends, and of Officer Gordon Mihan. The Mihans were Irish Catholic, like us, and we went to the same church. Chrissy and I endured Father Matthew's sermon patiently, waiting for Mass to be over so we could get out to play. Mihan was a cop back in the time when it meant being loved and respected by the whole neighborhood. One Saturday before lunch, Chrissy came to my block. "Rhea, you coming out to play?" she always called me from the street. Although she did like the boy stuff, like hide and seek and other things, playing with Chrissy didn't strictly mean playing. Sometimes we just talked, and at that time I was grateful to have someone to talk to. We went for a stroll around the block and stopped by Bob's store and maybe pop over to Karen Keene's bar for a milkshake, back when Keene served milkshakes. Ooh. Words are gonna be it for me today, eh? Maybe another drink of water will help. Alright. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" she asked abruptly. I replied that I wanted to be anything but a longshoreman, although some years have passed, the dock episode was still in my head. "I'm going to be a police officer like my dad," she said proudly. But I didn't picture her as a cop, and I told her. Let's see, you can't. This gives us +2 to order. Let's see, laugh, girls can't be cop silly. It doesn't suit you, +1 for Chrissy. You're too smart to be a cop. They're evil, +2 liberty, -1 Chrissy. Cops are bad people. Honestly, I wouldn't dash somebody's hopes like that. So if I have to choose one of these, I probably would say it doesn't suit you, because I do like the fact that he's saying you're you're too smart. Not saying that she can't, but that she's just really smart, right? I said it as if it were an obvious statement. What do you mean? Chrissy looked at me intrigued. Chrissy was the most intelligent person I knew. Her grade was superb. I told her that she was worth much more to be a judge, a scientist, cure disease, or send rockets into outer space. She was worth much more. She was destined to do something important. I even thought Chrissy had the potential to be the first female president of the United States. But any dork could be a cop. That's not true. My father's smart. She still didn't get what I wanted to tell her. I've never been good with words, and the limited vocabulary of an 8-year-old didn't help me either. I tried to explain that it was true that Officer Mihan was no idiot, but he wasn't like Chrissy. People like Mihan, my dad, or me were streetwise. We read the circumstances. We dodged problems. Chrissy, however, was the kind of person who solved problems. She was analytical, thoughtful, sharp-tongued. Obviously, I don't know any of these words at that age, but I think I managed to get through to her somehow. Well, Christy shrugged, I'm going to be a problem-solving police officer, whatever that means. We returned home after the walk. We said goodbye at her building's doorway, which was a couple of blocks before mine. Before going in, she stared at me for a few moments with a smile on her face. You're very strange, Rhea, but I like you. And then she kissed my cheek. We already read this. September 30th, 1959. Playing chopsticks. The weekends went by quickly until Sunday morning. The biggest culprit was Father Matthew's sermons in church. Paul and I hated Mass, but we didn't dare to complain in front of Mom. She was devout. When I was little, Mass was daily. Now we barely comply with our obligations to the Lord. The way she put it, going to church sounded like some sort of heavenly tax to be paid. Yet, my mother had a sweet and gentle view of religion. She spoke to us of a God who was infinitely good, who cared about us, who loved and protected us. My mom's God meant love. Father Matthew's God had nothing to do with that. My brother always said that Father Matthew reminded him of the evil giant in Jack and the Beanstalk. He was a huge fella, almost 6 feet tall. The echo of his throaty voice resonated in the church as he delivered his tightly focused sermons on angels with flaming swords, painful sacrifices, and divine punishment. Priest Father Matthew. His personal favorite was fire and brimstone falling on Sodom. Not even God couldn't find 10 righteous people in that city, he yelled. The guy was enamored with the Old Testament. Both Paul and me hated Mass, but for different reasons. Paul was just bored, but I was terrified of Father Matthew's God. Underneath his weekly sermons about evil, righteousness, and justice, there was an idea that probably defined his personality. Father Matthew believed we were all God's soldiers, and life was a never-ending battle of good against evil. One Sunday, Paul told me that he had learned a game for two in school. A game played with your fingers only. Chopsticks, it was called. It was quite fun and perfect for Mass. We followed the routine along with the rest of the churchgoers. We stood up, we sat down, knelt, recited, and gave each other sign of peace. But I was always looking at how many fingers were extended on Paul's hands. We were so focused on the game that neither of us noticed Father Matthew's shooting glance. It was more than enough for him. Mass went by in the blink of an eye. My brother won 3-2. I admit defeat, but I also pointed out that he had more practice than me. Our parents stopped to talk with a group of neighbors at the church gate. Another Sunday morning ritual. One of them, an old lady, pinched my cheek and said, "Look at you, Rhea. Look how much you've grown. Do you know who I am?" I shrugged. Of course I didn't know who the old hag was. As we waited for our parents to finish talking with the unnamed old lady and her group, we saw Father Matthew approaching us. "Hello, Frank, Esther. How is everything?" Father Matthew put his hands on my shoulder and paused while speaking. "May I talk with the boys in private? It'll only be a second." A priest in the 1960s represented the highest authority for a Catholic family. Many parents left their children in the care of the priest without a moment's hesitation. There's no need to say how much trauma and suffering this blind trust caused. Fortunately for Paul and me, Father Matthew was not that kind of priest. But, unfortunately for Paul and me, Father Matthew wasn't like Spencer Tracy's Father Flanagan in the Boys' Towns either. He took us to the Vasseray, next to the church. Paul and I followed him, terrified and silent, dealing with the unpleasant feeling in our guts, that mixture of shame for misbehaving and the fear of retaliation. Most of all, the fear of retaliation. As we entered, he led us to a small classroom. We knew it, placed from our CCD class. Paul and I followed, and since he did not signal us to sit down, we just stood. Father Matthew closed the door after us and stood in front of the wooden teacher's table. "Do you know why you're here, boys?" he asked. His deep, stern voice echoed in the silence of the vestry. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice? That I would let you play games in God's house? The church deserves all of our respect and all of our attention, even more than our own home, and Mass is one of the..." Father Matthew stopped abruptly. Paul told me later that he hadn't said a word, made a gesture or anything at that moment. He just thought, "Oh, another boring sermon." But somehow, Father Matthew knew what Paul was thinking. He pulled Paul's hair. Oh my goodness. Another drink of water. He pulled Paul's hair with his left hand violently. He almost dragged him across the floor. "Am I boring you? You're the eldest, Paul. You have to set an example. Where's your judgment, boy?" he hollered like a madman. He raised his huge right fist above Paul's face. So we have options. I kicked him in the shin. Let go of my brother, I yelled. So why I don't have enough aggression in me, right? Yeah, my aggression's -2. And I need a +1 aggression to be able to even do this. Would have given me some more physical 3 up with Paul, but -1 mom. Uh, See, I did nothing. Paul got the worst of it, but we got out of Paul got the worst of it, but we got out of there. See, I did nothing. Paul in secrecy. I probably wouldn't do that. I took the blame. It was my fault, Father, I said. Honestly, I probably would have been too scared as a kid to kick him in the shin, but I wouldn't make him take the whole blame. I probably would take it on myself, especially since he's clearly about to hit our brother. We have to do something. He held his hand on the spot and turned his head to me. Let go of my brother. Oh no, that's not what he said. Let's try this again. He held his hand on the spot and turned his head to me. He let go of my brother. I told him that if he had to punish someone, it had to be. I said that I had learned a new game at school and that it was a lot of fun and that I wanted to show it to Paul, that I wanted to impress my older brother, but it was not my intention to disrespect him. He put his hand on my shoulder. I squinted my eyes in anticipation of the slap, but it never came. You have shown courage, and you have shown sincerity, Rhea, but most of all, you have shown fairness, and that's what matters most. You may go, boys, but don't you ever think of fooling around in church again, okay? We nodded. A hair pulling was more than favorable balance, considering how it might have turned out. Why did you say that? Paul asked me. I shrugged. It was something I often did when I didn't know what to say. I just felt like doing it. It was stupid, he said as we walked back, but you saved my ass. I love you, little brother. Ah, more sleuth. And now we're +2 with Paul. November 5th, 1960, turning point. Up to this moment, I'd lived nothing but an ordinary childhood. Humble, definitely. A little rough in some times, maybe, but certainly mostly happy. Is that a typo? A little rough in sometimes, maybe. A little rough sometimes, maybe. Yeah, that. So I just want to preface the rest of this demo with there's always a chance that there's going to be typos in this because there is a demo. If we run into any more, I'll try and smooth them over to the best of my ability. But there may be a typo here or there. Also, yeah, let's just continue on with it. In a few years, I would go to high school, meet a girl, have a job, get married, and have 2.5 kids, and a house with a white picket fence and all of that. Of course, that never happened, or it didn't happen the way I expected it, at least. That my life went wrong had to do with the most special person in my family, the one to whom I felt most attached, the most important person at that time in my life. So we have my mother, dad or brother. Chicken sound. 1 second. And actually, more like I am blocking a spam messenger real quick. Cool. Banned. Not that they were saying anything important. It's more so just those messages that are like purchase views kind of thing. And honestly, I'm not concerned about people following me or watching me. This is more so something I'm doing to be able to keep track of my days just in general, and also to give me motivation to do something. When I have MS, I feel really drained and exhausted, and it kind of helps to have something else to focus on. Anyways, back to this. Something horrible is going to happen to one of these three people. To the person I'm closest with, which is either my mother or Paul, but I think I'm going to go with Paul because I really would like to have the best relationship with him. Alright, let's do it. So, Paul was a real pain in the ass at times, stubborn as can be. He had the best and worst of dad and mom, and he got on both of their nerves quite often. But he was funny, witty guy with a great sense of humor, and at the same time a loyal friend with a heart as big as the world. He was always getting into trouble and often dragged me into it, but that was always a lot of fun, even if we got our hide tanned from time to time. Paul Donovan was much more than my brother. He was my soulmate. Kidnapped? Brother, Paul Donovan. That's why his kidnapping tore me apart. I remember that day like it was yesterday. We lived about 10 minutes from school. We always walked back home. But that day, Mom couldn't pick us up from school. She had to work an extra afternoon shift at Angelo's. She told us to wait for Patrice Molirano. I apologize if I butcher names. You've been pre-warned in my other videos. I have an issue with names. I will try my best, but give me some grace. Patrice, the lady who lived in the 4th floor of our building, to pick us up. Time passed, almost an hour, and then Paul stood up. I'm tired of waiting. Let's go home. Man. He said and started walking. Oh, let's go home, man. He said and started walking towards the intersection of 6th and Franklin. He stepped out the door of the school gate, and a few raindrops began to fall. Paul put on his Red Sox cap. Ooh. Okay, I can already tell this might get a little difficult reading-wise. I'm tired of waiting, he says. So, Mom told us to wait. Give us order. Do whatever you want, Paul. I'm staying here. Keep waiting. Go with Paul. Sure. Okay, let's go. You know, honestly, if I were going to do one of these... Okay, so keep waiting means Paul is going to go by himself. I wouldn't do that. Try to convince Paul. Realistically, I probably would try to convince Paul, but the fact that this one is waiting and this one says go and this one is in between, it leads me to think that this one might have me stay behind as well. So I think I'm going to go with Paul. Yeah, because he already stepped out the door and put on his Red Sox cap, so we'll go with Paul. I followed Paul in the rain. I called out to him. He looked back at me. The rain began to fall heavily on our heads. cats and dogs. Hurry up, Bria, you'll get soaking wet, you dork, Paul challenged me. Move it. And he broke into a run. Catch me if you can. We laughed as we ran under the rain, mostly Paul, who was getting further and further ahead of me. We were just a year apart, but a year means a lot when you're a kid. My legs were not fast or strong enough to catch up with Paul, so I decided to do something. Took a shortcut, press the pace. Honestly, taking a shortcut's cheating. I would press the pace. I focused. I put all my energy into pushing my muscles to the limit. Did you think you were always going to beat me at everything, brother? No way. But it wasn't enough. Paul's silhouette kept getting further away. He was very fast. He was always faster than me. I lost sight of him as he entered the vacation lot behind Demetrius Brothers' workshop. I was out of breath and had to stop, with my hands on my knees as I tried to get my breath back. I watched my brother running off into the distance. That was the last time I saw Paul alive. When I arrived at the vacant lot, all I found was a Red Sox cap and a wheel tracks in the mud disappearing into the distance. Paul? I called, picking up his cap. Days passed. Officer Mihan, Chrissy's father, came to talk to us. I told him about the wheel tracks, that someone had taken my brother, that it had to be by force because he has never taken off his Red Sox cap. Typo. Mihan had a lot to do with the police, skipping the typical assumption. Sometimes kids run away from home. Thanks to him, Paul was considered an abduction from the start. Weeks passed. My brother's picture was plastered on milk cartons and taped to street lamps and telephone poles. We lived without living. From time to time, we received a call. Someone thought they'd seen Paul somewhere, sometime. I was mistaken for him. Sometimes I was mistaken for him. Whether they called out of good intentions or opportunism, none of these calls came to anything. Months passed. People forgot about little Paul Donovan. His face on the milk carton and street lamps was replaced by another child. It angered me. At the time. Oof. Okay. Typos are actually getting kind of bad. I'm sorry if I reread through sections. Give me a little bit of grace with what I'm working with. It angered me at the time, but what can you expect from a country where more than 500,000 people disappear every year? However, the neighborhood continued to talk about it. Even Saul Marchisio, the honest export-import businessman, offered to help my family with the search. We had our differences, Frank, he said to my father, but if that happened to John or Andrea, I don't know what I'd do. Tell me how I can help and I will. I was surprised that a manifesto like Marchisio had red lines. Not many. I only had to read the news from time to time to see how Marchisio dealt with things, but he had a wife and 2 kids. Hurting children was out of the question for him. However, even with the police and the mafia throwing themselves to find my brother, not a trace of him could be found, and years passed. Alright, so we're at Tutani now. Hope is dangerous and fucked up. We've gone 30 minutes in. I'm going to try and keep these down to 30 minutes, so I think this is where we will stop. The report, January 18th, 1979. I appreciate you guys checking out the video, liking, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. If you don't feel like doing any of that, once again, that's okay. It's your prerogative. You can do whatever you'd like. I just kind of appreciate playing these games. Gives me something to do. Make sure I'm not stagnant. So, until next time. Pull this up so I can actually come up here and end it. Until next time. Our next game will be on Sunday. That will be Disgaea. I definitely didn't drop that last Sunday, so again, I do apologize. I will try and be better with these, but I do have multiple sclerosis. Normally, I get better after my infusions, but I just haven't been feeling that great. I think I've come down with a cold or something. So if I also sound like a frog, that's why, and I apologize. I've tried to drink a lot of water during this to make sure I didn't sound like that. But once again, thank you for joining, and see you around.